The first sign that something was wrong came with the horses. They stood restless at the fence line long before the sun dipped low, ears twitching, hooves shifting against the dry ground. The rancher noticed it while mending a loose board, his hands pausing mid-work as he scanned the open land. The horizon looked the same as it always had, wide and quiet, but years of living alone had taught him that silence could carry warnings. He lived far from town by choice more than chance. The land suited him. It asked little beyond honest work, and returned just enough to keep a man steady. Days followed a rhythm he trusted. Wake before light, tend the animals, walk the fences, eat simple meals, sleep when the stars grew sharp. People said he liked being alone. The truth was more complicated. Loneliness had settled into him slowly, like dust into old wood, until it felt permanent. That evening, as shadows stretched long across the fields, he saw movement near the far road. A figure walked unsteadily, cutting across land few ever crossed without reason. Travelers usually followed the main path, kept to the dust trail that led to town. This one did not. This one seemed unsure, stopping often, turning as if lost. The rancher straightened, wiping his hands on his worn trousers. He had not seen a stranger this close to his land in years. Folks passed through town from time to time, but they rarely came this far out unless they were desperate or foolish. Both possibilities put him on edge. He watched as the figure drew closer, resolving into a man by the way he moved, though his posture was wrong somehow, slumped, careful, as if every step cost more than it should. The rancher felt a pull he could not explain. Curiosity mixed with caution, a feeling he had learned to respect. By the time the stranger reached the fence, the sun was bleeding into the sky, painting everything in muted gold. The man stopped there, gripping the wood as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. His clothes were dusty, travel-worn, not poor exactly, but well-used. His hat hung low, hiding most of his face. The rancher did not call out at first. He waited, letting the moment speak for itself. Out here, words were often unnecessary. Finally, the stranger lifted his head. Their eyes met across the fence. Something passed between them then, quick and unspoken. Recognition without familiarity, a sense that this meeting was not an accident. The stranger asked for water. His voice was rough, strained, like someone who had not spoken in a long while. The rancher nodded and gestured toward the house without a word. He did not open the gate right away. He never did. Trust came slow to a man who had learned to rely only on himself. As they walked, the rancher studied him from the corner of his eye. There was something guarded about the way the stranger moved, like a man used to watching his back. His boots were good quality, though scuffed. His hands bore marks of work, but not the kind done on land like this. The rancher wondered where he came from and what had driven him so far off the road. Inside the small house, the air smelled of wood smoke and coffee grounds. The rancher poured water into a tin cup and handed it over. The stranger drank deeply, then slower, as if savoring the relief. When he lowered the cup, his hand trembled slightly. The rancher noticed. He asked no questions yet. He had learned that people shared more when given space. The stranger glanced around the room, taking in the sparse furnishings, the quiet order. There was a loneliness here that matched the one in his own eyes. They sat at the rough table, silence stretching between them. Outside, the horses finally settled, as if reassured. The rancher felt the oddest sense of unease, not fear exactly, but awareness. His quiet life, so carefully maintained, felt suddenly fragile. The stranger spoke again, thanking him for the water. He said he had been walking since morning, that his horse had gone lame miles back. He said he would be on his way soon. Words sounded practiced, like a story told before. The rancher sensed gaps in it, spaces where truth had been trimmed away. He offered food. The stranger hesitated, then accepted. Hunger has a way of breaking pride. As they ate, the rancher noticed how carefully the man watched the door, how he flinched at sudden sounds. Whatever had brought him here had not been gentle. Night crept in quietly, sky darkened, stars beginning to prick through. The stranger shifted in his chair, clearly torn. He said it might not be safe for him to stay. The words hung there, heavy with implication. The rancher leaned back, studying him fully now. He saw more than weariness. He saw fear held in check, and beneath it, determination. A man running from something, or perhaps toward it. The rancher knew that look well. He had worn it himself once, long ago, before the land became his refuge. Told the stranger he could stay the night. The offer surprised them both. The stranger searched his face, as if weighing the risk. At last he nodded. Relief flickered briefly before disappearing behind caution. He thanked the rancher again, quieter this time. They spoke little after that. The rancher prepared a place to sleep, listening to the wind brush against the walls. He wondered what he was doing, inviting disruption into a life built on solitude. Yet a part of him felt awake in a way it had not in years. As he lay down, he heard the stranger move restlessly in the other room. The sound tugged at him. He knew this visit would not end simply. Men did not wander into places like this by chance. They arrived carrying trouble, even if it had not yet caught up to them. Outside, somewhere beyond the fence line, an unfamiliar sound echoed faintly, then faded. The rancher's eyes opened in the dark. He stared at the ceiling, heart beating just a little faster. By morning, everything could change. The rancher did not sleep much that night. He lay still on his narrow bed, listening to the small sounds of the house, the creak of wood settling, the wind moving along the walls. Every so often, he heard the stranger shift in the other room, a quiet rustle that spoke of restlessness rather than comfort. The rancher had opened his door to many things over the years: dust storms, lost calves, stray dogs. He could not remember the last time he had opened it to a man carrying so much silence. When dawn finally began to thin the darkness, the rancher rose. He pulled on his boots and stepped outside, breathing in the cool air. The land stretched out before him, calm and familiar, yet it felt changed somehow, as if it were holding its breath. We walked the fence line out of habit, checking posts and wire, but his thoughts kept circling back to the house behind him. As he worked, he noticed something that tightened his chest. Fresh tracks near the road, deeper than a single man's steps. Horse tracks, more than one, pressed into the dirt where it was still soft from the night. They were not there yesterday. He crouched, studying them, the way a man does when the land speaks quietly but clearly. Whoever had passed through had not stopped long, but they had been close enough to matter. He straightened slowly. The stranger's words from the night before returned to him. It might not be safe. At the time, he had taken them as a general warning, the kind men offered when they carried private trouble. Now the warning felt more real. Inside, the stranger was awake when the rancher returned. He sat at the table, hat beside him, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. In the morning light, his face was easier to see. There were lines there that spoke of hard miles and harder choices. His eyes were sharp, always moving, yet tired in a way that ran deep. They nodded to each other. No greeting beyond that. The rancher poured himself coffee and sat across from him. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence shared by men who knew that words once spoken could not be pulled back. The stranger broke it first. He asked if the rancher had always lived here. The question sounded simple, but it carried weight. The rancher told him he had been here a long time, long enough that the land felt like an extension of himself, long enough that leaving was no longer something he considered. The stranger nodded, as if he understood more than was said. He spoke then of travel, of roads that led nowhere, and towns that promised more than they delivered. He did not name places. He did not name people. He spoke carefully, choosing words like a man stepping around broken glass. As the conversation unfolded, the rancher learned pieces without ever hearing the whole. The stranger had once worked honest jobs, had once believed in steady ground beneath his feet. Something had gone wrong, something involving money, perhaps, or loyalty. The details stayed just out of reach, but the weight of them pressed into the room. The rancher listened. He had learned long ago that listening was often more valuable than asking. He recognized the look in the stranger's eyes, the way a man carried regret like a hidden wound. He had seen it in the mirror once, years before, after a choice that had cost him more than he had known at the time. Outside, the day warmed. The horses whinnied softly, and the sound drifted through the open window. The stranger flinched at a sudden noise, hand moving without thought. The rancher noticed and said nothing, but the tension settled deeper. After breakfast, the rancher went about his chores. The stranger offered to help. The rancher hesitated, then agreed. Work, he knew, had a way of loosening tongues or at least easing the mind. They moved together through the day, mending a broken rail, checking water, tending to a limping calf. The stranger worked well, efficient and focused, but he kept glancing toward the road. As the sun climbed, dust shimmered in the distance. A shape moved far off, too far to see clearly. The stranger stiffened. The rancher followed his gaze, heart sinking. He could not yet tell what it was, but the stranger's reaction told him enough. They said nothing, but the unspoken filled the space between them. Whatever the stranger was running from had not stopped running. By midday, the stranger's unease had grown impossible to ignore. He admitted then that he had not come by accident. He said he had heard of this ranch from a man back in town, someone who spoke of a place far from trouble, owned by someone who minded his own business. The rancher felt a flicker of irritation at that, mixed with something else. Being known, even in that small way, felt like a crack in the solitude he had built. The stranger said he had hoped to rest, just briefly, before moving on. He said he had not expected to be followed so closely. His jaw tightened as he spoke, anger and fear mingling in his voice. He did not ask for help outright, but the request hung there all the same. The rancher felt the weight of choice settle on his shoulders. He had lived a quiet life for a reason. Quiet kept a man safe. Quiet kept old ghosts at bay. Yet looking at the stranger, he knew turning him away now would not bring his peace back. That peace had already been disturbed. In the afternoon, a cloud of dust rose on the road, closer this time. The rancher shaded his eyes, watching. The stranger stepped beside him, face pale but controlled. He said nothing, but his presence was tense, coiled like a wire pulled too tight. 2 riders came into view at last. They did not hurry. They rode with the confidence of men who expected answers when they arrived. The rancher felt a familiar anger stir, slow and steady. This was his land. No one came onto it without his say. The riders stopped at the fence. One of them called out, asking if the rancher had seen a man pass through. His tone was polite enough, but his eyes were sharp, searching. The rancher answered calmly, saying travelers came and went, but few crossed his land. The rider's gaze shifted to the stranger. The moment stretched. The air felt tight, charged. The stranger met the man's stare without flinching, but his hand twitched near his side. The rancher stepped forward, placing himself slightly between them. He said the man was his guest. The word guest carried weight here. It was not offered lightly. The rider smiled thinly and said he meant no trouble. He said they were just looking to settle a matter. His eyes said otherwise. The second rider stayed silent, watching everything. The rancher's mind raced. He knew trouble when he saw it. Also knew that once lines were drawn, they could not be erased. He wondered how a life built on solitude had led him here, standing between a stranger and the men hunting him. The rider asked again, more directly this time. The rancher felt the stranger's tension beside him, like heat. He sensed the land itself waiting, the animals gone quiet, the wind stilled. He answered slowly, choosing his words with care. He said any matters here would be handled on his terms. The rider's smile faded, his jaw tightened. The stranger leaned closer and whispered that he never meant to drag anyone else into this. The rancher did not respond. His eyes stayed on the men at the fence. The standoff hung there, heavy and unresolved. No one moved. No one backed down. The sun beat down, and sweat traced slow paths along their skin. In that moment, the rancher understood something with painful clarity. His quiet life was already gone. Whatever happened next would change everything. The riders had not yet left. The riders did not leave right away. They stayed where they were, reins loose in their hands, studying the rancher and the stranger as if measuring weight on a scale. The dust slowly settled around their horses' legs, but the tension did not settle with it. They clung to the air, thick and watchful. The rancher kept his stance easy, though every muscle in his body was alert. He had stood his ground before, against storms and sickness and the slow grind of loneliness, but this was different. This carried the sharp edge of human intent. He knew that once men like these started asking questions, they rarely stopped with the first answer. One rider spoke again, asking the stranger's name. His tone was casual, almost friendly, but the rancher could hear the challenge beneath it. The stranger did not answer. He stood still, eyes fixed forward, jaw set. Silence became its own response. The rancher stepped forward another inch, making the boundary clearer. He said names were not shared lightly here. He said people passed through his land for many reasons, and he did not make a habit of explaining them to outsiders. His voice stayed even, but the message was firm. The second rider finally spoke, quieter than the first. He said they were not outsiders, said they were trying to recover something that belonged to them. Money, maybe, or information? He did not specify. He glanced at the stranger when he spoke, and something dark flickered in his eyes. The stranger's shoulders tightened. The rancher noticed the small movement and felt a surge of anger he did not fully understand. He barely knew this man, yet the idea of him being hunted stirred something protective and old inside him. From the house, the faint creak of a loose shutter sounded in the breeze. The horses in the corral stamped and snorted, sensing the unease. The land felt charged, as if it remembered other confrontations long buried. The rancher said that whatever had been lost was not on his land. He suggested the riders continue their search elsewhere. His words were polite, but there was no room left in them. The first rider smiled again, thinner this time. He said searches had a way of turning up surprises, said he would hate for misunderstandings to cause trouble. The implication hung there heavy. The rancher felt the stranger shift beside him, as if preparing for something worse. He caught a glimpse of fear in the man's eyes, quickly masked by resolve. That fear told him more than any confession could have. After a long moment, the riders exchanged a look. First tipped his hat slightly, a gesture that might have been respect or mockery. He said they would be on their way for now, said they would return if necessary. The rancher nodded once. He did not thank them. He watched as they turned their horses and rode back toward the road, their figures shrinking against the wide land. The dust they kicked up lingered long after they were gone. Only when they were out of sight did the rancher release the breath he had been holding. He turned to the stranger, studying him closely. The man looked shaken but relieved, like someone who had narrowly escaped a trap. Relief, the rancher knew, could be dangerous. It often made people careless. They walked back toward the house in silence. The stranger spoke only when they reached the porch. He said he was sorry again, said the men would not give up easily, said the rancher should have sent him away when he had the chance. The rancher leaned against the post, arms crossed. He said, sending him away now would not change what had already happened. The riders had seen him. They knew where he was. Trouble did not politely forget. The stranger ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear. He admitted then that he had once worked for men like that, men who believed power came from owning others' mistakes. He said he had been useful to them until he refused to cross a line he could not live with. Did not say what that line was. He did not need to. The weight of it showed in his eyes. As the afternoon wore on, they discussed options without truly discussing them. Leave before nightfall. Stay hidden. Make a stand. Each possibility carried its own risks. The rancher felt the pull of his old instincts, the ones that told him to protect what was his, to defend his land against anyone who threatened it. At the same time, a quieter voice warned him of the cost. He thought of the years he had spent alone, of the way solitude had become both shelter and prison. He wondered if this moment was the price of choosing isolation, the reckoning that came when a man tried to live without entanglements. The stranger offered to leave under cover of darkness. He said he would draw the trouble away. The rancher listened, then shook his head, said running rarely ended things. It only stretched them out. As evening approached, clouds gathered low on the horizon. The air grew heavy, charged with the promise of a storm. The rancher prepared the animals, securing gates and checking lines. The stranger helped without being asked, his movements quick and purposeful. Working together eased the tension between them, if only slightly. As they worked, the stranger spoke more freely, perhaps because the land demanded focus, spoke of a past life filled with noise and ambition, of choices made under pressure, spoke of regret, of nights spent replaying moments he wished he could change. The rancher listened, recognizing the pattern. Different roads, similar burdens. The storm rolled in faster than expected. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and steady. The first drops of rain darkened the dust. The sky pressed down, making the world feel smaller, closer. They retreated to the house as the rain began in earnest. Inside, the sound of water on the roof was loud, relentless. The rancher lit a lamp, its glow throwing long shadows across the walls. The stranger sat at the table, hands clasped, staring at nothing. The rancher poured coffee, though neither needed the warmth. He asked quietly what the men wanted. The stranger hesitated, then said, "It was not just money. It was proof, records, names, things that could unravel people who believed themselves untouchable." He said he had taken something without fully understanding how far their reach extended. The rancher felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. He realized then that this was larger than a personal dispute. It touched systems of power that did not like to be exposed. His land, his quiet life, felt suddenly very small against that truth. Outside, the storm intensified. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the fields. In that flash, the rancher saw movement near the road again. Shapes, indistinct but deliberate. His jaw tightened. The stranger noticed his look and turned. He saw it too. Fear flickered, then determination. He said they had come sooner than expected. The rancher checked the door, the windows, the back of the house. He felt the old readiness settle into his bones, the calm that came when action replaced uncertainty. He did not reach for anything he did not already carry. He did not need to. The stranger stood, pacing. He said this was not how it was supposed to happen. He said he had hoped to disappear, to start over somewhere quiet. The rancher almost laughed at that. Quiet, he knew now, was never guaranteed. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to rattle the windows. The horses whinnied in alarm. The storm-massed sound made distance hard to judge. The riders could be closer than they appeared. The rancher told the stranger to stay inside while he checked the perimeter. The stranger refused, said he would not hide behind another man's courage. The words carried both gratitude and guilt. They stepped onto the porch together, rain soaking their clothes. The world narrowed to the sound of water and thunder. Somewhere beyond the fence line, a horse snorted. The rancher felt the moment stretching, tightening like a wire. He realized then that whatever choices lay ahead would bind him to this stranger in ways neither had anticipated. The quiet life he had guarded so fiercely was already gone, replaced by something raw and dangerous. Lightning split the sky again, and in its brief glare, he saw figures moving closer. Rain hammered the porch roof, loud enough to blur distance and direction. The rancher stood still, letting his eyes adjust, listening past the storm. Years on open land had taught him that danger announced itself in small ways. A shift in wind, a horse breathing wrong, a silence where there should be sound. The stranger stood beside him, shoulders squared, jaw tight. He looked less like a man running now, and more like someone bracing for what had long been chasing him. The rancher sensed a change in him, subtle but important. Fear was still there, but it no longer ruled him. Another flash of lightning tore across the sky, bright as day for a split second. In that sharp light, the rancher counted 3 figures moving along the fence line. They were keeping low, using the storm for cover. The rancher's grip tightened on the porch rail. 3 was more than he had hoped for, fewer than he had feared. He leaned closer to the stranger and spoke low, his voice nearly lost to the rain. He told him to stay close, to follow his lead. The stranger nodded without argument. Trust had formed between them in quiet pieces, built from shared risk and unspoken understanding. They stepped down into the mud, boots sinking with each step. The rain soaked through clothes, plastered hair to skin, turned the world into shades of dark and darker. The rancher moved with purpose, guiding them toward the side of the house where shadows ran deepest. He knew every dip in the ground, every place water pooled. That knowledge steadied him. From the corral came a sudden crash as one of the horses spooked, striking the fence. The sound carried sharp even through the storm. The figures froze. One raised an arm, signaling the others. The rancher felt the moment tighten. The thin line between waiting and acting stretched to its limit. The stranger whispered that he was sorry again, that this was not the life the rancher had chosen. The rancher did not answer. He was past regret now. What mattered was what came next. Thunder rolled overhead, close enough to vibrate through bone. The storm gave cover, but also chaos. The rancher used it, moving when the noise peaked, stopping when it faded. They edged toward the barn, where the structure broke sightlines and offered options. Inside the barn, the air smelled of wet hay and animals. The rancher closed the door slowly, careful not to let it slam. The darkness wrapped around them, broken only by thin lines of light slipping through warped boards. The stranger's breathing was loud in the close space. He forced himself to slow it, copying the rancher's steady rhythm. From outside came voices, raised to be heard over the rain. The rancher caught fragments, questions, frustration. The riders were closer now, circling, testing. They were confident, but not careless. That made them dangerous. The stranger leaned against a post, eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, there was resolve there, clear and strong. He whispered that he would face them if it came to that. He said he was tired of running, tired of letting others pay for his choices. The rancher studied him, seeing not a burden but a man at a turning point. He thought of his own past, of the moment he had chosen land over people, quiet over connection. He had believed that choice final. Tonight was proving him wrong. A shape moved past the barn window. The rancher held up a hand, signaling stillness. His mind worked quickly, weighing paths and risks. He knew the land extended beyond the backfields, broken by low hills and scrub. If they could reach it, the storm might give them enough confusion to turn the tide. The voices drew nearer. One of the riders called out, telling them to come out and talk. He said no one needed to get hurt. The rancher almost smiled at that. Men who said such things rarely meant them. The stranger's hand shook slightly, then steadied. He met the rancher's eyes, a silent question there. The rancher nodded once. It was time to move. They slipped out the back of the barn as another crack of thunder split the sky. Rain poured down in sheets, erasing tracks almost as soon as they were made. They moved low and fast, the rancher leading them along a narrow path only he used, one that dipped into a shallow ravine before climbing toward higher ground. Behind them, a shout went up. One of the riders had spotted movement. Footsteps splashed through mud. The chase was on. The rancher felt the familiar rush of focus, the world narrowing to breath and motion. He did not look back. He trusted the stranger to keep up, and he did. Whatever weakness the man had carried when he arrived was gone now, burned away by necessity. They reached the ravine and dropped down, water rushing around their ankles. The rain-fed stream masked sound, swallowed evidence. The rancher guided them upstream briefly, then cut across, breaking the line. It was an old trick, one he had used before on stray cattle. Tonight it would have to work on men. The stranger stumbled once, catching himself on a rock. The rancher grabbed his arm, hauling him upright without a word. The contact was brief, but grounding. They pushed on. Shouts echoed behind them, confused now, uncertain. The riders had lost the clear trail. The storm worked in their favor, turning pursuit into guesswork. They climbed hard, lungs burning, until they reached a stand of trees that marked the edge of the rancher's land. Beyond it lay rough country, less forgiving, less known. The rancher slowed, weighing the next move. Crossing that line would mean more than escaping for the night. It would mean stepping into a future he had avoided for years. The stranger watched him, rain streaming down his face, said quietly that the rancher did not have to go any farther, said he could keep moving alone. The offer was real heavy with gratitude. The rancher shook his head. He said some lines were crossed only once. His voice held no bitterness, only acceptance. He realized then that protecting this man was not just about defiance. It was about choosing connection over isolation, even when it cost. They moved into the trees. The branches broke the rain, the ground softer but quieter. The rancher led them along a ridge, careful to avoid skylining themselves against the lighter sky. Below, the riders' voices rose and fell, frustration sharpening them. Time stretched, minutes felt like hours. The storm began to ease slightly, thunder rolling farther away. That worried the rancher. Clearer conditions would favor the hunters. They paused beneath a thick tree, catching their breath. The stranger spoke softly, almost to himself. He said that if they made it through this, he wanted to do something right for once. He said he was tired of being defined by what he ran from. The rancher listened, heart heavy and hopeful all at once. He said nothing, but he felt the shape of a different future forming, fragile, but possible. A sudden light flared below. A lantern. One of the riders had lit it, trying to cut through the darkness. The glow bobbed, casting long shadows. The rancher cursed under his breath. They were narrowing the search. He scanned the terrain, mind racing. Ahead lay a narrow pass between rocks, a place where sound carried and footing was treacherous. Risky, but it might force the riders to slow, to separate. Sometimes danger was the only path to safety. He pointed, and the stranger nodded. They moved again. Careful now, every step measured. The rain tapered to a mist, leaving the world damp and shining. Their clothes clung heavy, muscles aching. As they entered the pass, a voice called out behind them, closer than before. The lantern light flared brighter, sweeping the trees. The riders were gaining ground. The rancher felt the tension crest, every nerve alive. This was the edge, the moment where everything balanced. He thought of the quiet mornings he might never have again, of the stranger who had shattered his solitude and given it new meaning. They reached the narrowest point of the pass, just as footsteps sounded close behind. The stranger glanced back, fear flashing, then looked forward again, resolve hardening. Whatever happened next would decide more than escape. The rancher stepped forward, positioning himself where he could see both paths. Rain dripped from his hat brim. His breath slowed, steady and calm. Behind them, the lantern light flared once more, close enough now to cast their shadows against the rock. The night seemed to hold still, waiting. The lantern light wavered, then stopped. The riders' voices fell quiet, replaced by the sound of boots scraping rock. The rancher held his ground, one hand raised slightly, signaling the stranger to stay still. The narrow pass funneled sound and movement, turning every breath into a risk. Rain dripped steadily from the rocks, each drop echoing like a heartbeat. One rider stepped forward into the edge of the light. He was younger than the rancher expected, face tight with anger and fatigue. Called out again, saying they did not want trouble, only answers. His words rang hollow, worn thin by the night and the chase. The rancher spoke then, his voice calm and steady. He said this land was his, and no one crossed it without his say. He said the storm had scattered enough truth for one night, and it was time for everyone to go their separate ways. The words surprised even him. They carried a strength he had not felt in years. The rider hesitated. Behind him, the others shifted, unsure. The world seemed to pause, waiting for the next choice. The stranger stepped forward beside the rancher. His voice shook at first, then steadied. He said the running was over, said he would face whatever followed, but not here, and not like this. He spoke of mistakes without naming them, of debts carried too long. He asked only for a chance to set things right. The lantern light flickered. The rider's expression changed, confusion cutting through his anger. He lowered the lantern a fraction. He asked what the rancher had to do with any of it. The rancher answered simply. He said everyone deserved a place to stand without fear. He said tonight that place was here. Winds stirred the trees, carrying the last of the storm away. In the thinning darkness, the riders looked at one another. The chase had lost its shape. What began as certainty had become doubt. Finally, the lantern dipped. The rider muttered something about it not being worth it, about taking the matter elsewhere. One by one, the riders turned back, their footsteps fading into the wet ground. The light grew smaller, then disappeared entirely. Silence settled over the pass, deep and complete. The rancher did not move until he was sure they were gone. When he finally let out a breath, it felt like the first real one in hours. The stranger sagged slightly, relief washing over him. He leaned against the rock, rain-soaked and exhausted. The rancher placed a steady hand on his shoulder, grounding them both. No words were needed then. Survival spoke for itself. They made their way back through the trees as dawn began to hint at the horizon. The land looked different in the soft gray light, gentler, as if the night had wrung its secrets out of it. Birds stirred, tentative at first, then bolder. Life resumed its quiet rhythm. At the ranch house, the porch stood empty and waiting. The rancher built a small fire inside, its warmth cutting through the damp chill. He poured coffee into 2 chipped cups, the simple act feeling ceremonial. They sat at the table, steam rising between them. The stranger spoke at last. He told his story in pieces, careful and honest. He spoke of deals gone wrong, of trusting the wrong people, of fear driving him farther than he ever meant to go. He did not ask for forgiveness. He only offered truth. The rancher listened without interruption. He had learned long ago that silence could be a gift. When the story ended, he nodded once. He said the past had a way of catching up, but it did not have to decide the future. He said there were ways to make things right that did not involve running. Days passed. Word came through quiet channels that the riders had moved on, their interest cooled by the storm and the stand taken in the pass. The stranger stayed, helping with chores, mending fences, earning his place one task at a time. The rancher watched him work, seeing effort replace fear. Neighbors noticed the change. The ranch no longer felt as closed, as distant. Laughter returned in small doses, cautious but real. The land responded to, fields tended with shared purpose, animals calmer under steady hands. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the rancher and the stranger stood watching the horizon burn gold. The stranger spoke of leaving someday, of finishing what he had started in a way he could live with. The rancher nodded, understanding the pull of unfinished business. When the day came, it was quiet. No storm, no chase. The stranger packed lightly, his face clear. He thanked the rancher for more than shelter. He thanked him for the chance to stop running. The rancher clasped his hand, firm and sure. He said the land would be here if the road ever led back. The stranger smiled, a real one, then turned toward the rising sun. Seasons shifted. The rancher found his days fuller, his nights less heavy. He still valued quiet, but it no longer felt like a wall. It felt like space, open and welcoming. Sometimes when the wind moved just right, he thought of that night in the pass, of the choice made when it mattered most. He knew then that a quiet life was not one without change, but one shaped by the courage to let others in. The ranch stood steady, a place of work and warmth, marked by trust earned and given. And in that steadiness, the rancher found something he had not known he was missing. Not solitude, but connection. Not safety, but purpose. The land stretched wide before him, full of promise, and for the first time in a long while, he stepped forward with it.